It feels like we're living in a world that's really struggling with trust, right? So, how on earth are we supposed to build trust in something as powerful and brand new as artificial intelligence? Well, today we're going to look at how one small nation is trying to write the global playbook for just that. This quote from the World Economic Forum really just nails where we are right now. We're caught in this weird limbo where the old rulebook is falling apart and nobody's finished writing the new one yet. So, that's the perfect setup for our first section, a world losing trust. Because really, at the heart of all this struggle is a massive breakdown in trust on a global scale. See, for decades, we've had this thing called the rules-based order, a whole set of international agreements and norms. But that foundation, it's starting to crumble. And what's left is this feeling of fragility, Things are unpredictable, and more people are looking around thinking, yeah, this system is broken. Okay, so what's the move here? Well, Singapore's president Tharman Shanmugaratnam says that Plan A, basically just crossing our fingers and hoping the old system sorts itself out, is way too risky. Instead, he's talking about a Plan B, and it's a really pragmatic idea. Groups of countries who are on the same page can team up to tackle specific shared problems, to get the ball rolling again where the bigger system has just ground to a halt. And, as if on cue, a brand new global challenge shows up on our doorstep, and this one, it demands an absolutely massive amount of trust. We're not just talking about another app on your phone here. This is a whole new category of AI. Yeah, we're talking about agentic AI. And the key word you gotta remember is actions. I mean, just think about this for a second. An AI that doesn't just show you flight options, but goes ahead and books the ticket, reserves the hotel, and pops it right into your calendar, all by itself. It can actually do stuff. Here's a really great analogy to wrap your head around this. Think of the generative AI we're used to, like ChatGPT, as a brilliant research assistant. It's smart, it's helpful, but it can't really do anything on its own. Agentic AI, that's like handing that assistant the keys to the office and the company credit card. The potential is obviously huge, but man, so are the risks. And these risks are no joke. We're talking about it accessing sensitive data, making payments it shouldn't, or messing up a critical customer database by mistake. And then there's this really interesting human problem called automation bias, which is basically where we start to trust the system too much, right up until it makes a huge mistake. And it all boils down to this one massive question. When one of these AI agents goes off the rails, who's actually on the hook for it? Who's accountable? So, staring down this new frontier, Singapore decided it wasn't going to wait around. They didn't just point out all the problems, they actually went and built a playbook to try and solve them. And get this, at the very same World Economic Forum where everyone was talking about global trust falling apart, Singapore unveiled this, the world's very first model AI governance framework, designed specifically for this new agentic AI. It's basically a guide for how to build responsible guardrails around this incredibly powerful new tech. So, what's in this playbook? How does it actually work? Well, it's built on 4 main pillars. First off, you have to assess and limit the risks right from the start. Pick the right jobs for the AI and don't give it more power than it needs. Second, you've got to make sure there's a human in the loop for the really important decisions. Third, you need to implement technical controls. Think of them as safety nets. And finally, number 4, you have to be transparent with the end users and actually teach them how to use it responsibly. Okay, but a framework is just a bunch of ideas on paper if you can't actually put it into practice, right? And this is where Singapore's super pragmatic approach really shines. They didn't just write the rulebook, they created the test to go with it. And they call it the starter kit. It's basically a hands-on guide for developers so they can pressure test their AI for all the major safety risks before it ever gets released to the public. So the kit really zeroes in on these 5 critical risk areas. The big questions. Is the AI just making stuff up, hallucinating? Is it biased against certain groups? Can you trick it into creating something awful? Is it going to leak private data? And how easy is it for attackers to break its safety features? You have to have solid answers to these questions if you're ever going to build real trust. So to answer those questions, the starter kit lays out 2 main ways to test this stuff. First up is benchmarking. Think of this like a standardized exam for the AI. You're testing it against a known set of questions to see if it gets the right answers. But then there's red teaming. This is totally different. It's more like a dynamic stress test. You're basically hiring a team to try and break the system on purpose, to find all the weird blind spots and vulnerabilities you'd never think of otherwise. Okay, so let's pull the camera back for a second. We started this whole conversation talking about a world that's losing trust. And then we dove deep into a really technical solution for a really technical problem. But what if these two things are actually connected? And this brings us back to that key insight from President Tharman. He says that trust isn't some abstract idea floating around in the air. It's built from the ground up. When people trust each other and their own institutions at home, they have a lot more faith in the idea of cooperating with other countries. And that, right there, is the big idea. Look, AI safety is not a zero-sum game where one person's win is another's loss. Literally every country on Earth, no matter its politics, has a huge interest in making sure this technology doesn't just spiral out of control. It's the perfect example of one of those Plan B challenges, right? A common problem that a group of countries can decide to solve together. And that leaves us with a pretty powerful final thought. If we can actually manage to create transparent, verifiable rules for something as mind-blowingly complex and powerful as AI, could the process of doing that, the act of just working together on a technical problem, become a kind of blueprint for rebuilding trust on the much bigger, much messier world stage? Maybe it's a way to start fixing Plan A by proving that Plan B can actually work.